I learned a lot about buyouts and advances on sync. So here's something to listen to right now. Perk up your ears, my friends. There is two kinds of sync licensing, right? There is, or incomes from sync licensing, basically two. There's actually a lot, but let's talk about the big two, which is the sync payment for the use of a song. And they might have $30,000 in their budget for an episode of a show. And at the very end, they get down and I say, we need this one more song. We got $2,000 left. They would give you, the library, that $2,000. If it's $2,000, could be 500, could be less, but it could be more. That is the sync payment that goes to the library. Now, there's another kind of sync payment, and that is a blanket license. They pay a blanket license to be able to use songs from the library without any upfront fees. And then all of those blanket licenses for that library are then, if they're being ethical, they're chopping up that percentage-wise and sending it out in their quarterly or their bi-yearly payments to their writers. That's the sync side. That's the upfront side that the television shows and movies or whatever it is, production companies pay to use that song. Then there is what we were talking about earlier today, and that's the BMI payment, the PRO payment that goes to BMI, ASCAP, CSAC, whoever you're with, PRS. That payment comes to you quarterly, at least BMI pays quarterly. That's usually the general thing we do. We make music, we give it to the library, they make these deal with us to split sync 50-50, and they take the publishing of the PRO and we get the writers of the PRO, and that's the way it kind of works. I go into this a little bit more clearly in my course in my ebook if you're interested. But I had a tension album that I did with Terry lately, and Terry and I finished that album. We pitched it to a library, a brand new library that I had just started working on some country stuff with. They loved the tension album, and they offered to buy out the sync. In lieu of getting any sync income on the front end, they offered to pay us a certain amount of $1,000. And we took that $1,000. To be honest, folks, I would take it every time. I think the sync part, the upfront part, here's a hot take. Are you ready? This is a very hot take here that you're catching right now. I think the front end of sync on the library side, not necessarily if you're working with a sync agent who can secure you a $2,000 advance or a $2,000 buyout. But if you're working on the library side, my hot take is I would take a buyout of sync every time. Because, and especially at the point I'm in my career, maybe you wouldn't if you're younger, but I have several reasons for why I would take a buyout. Number one reason is because, first of all, there's no sync guaranteed in the future. There's no PRO guaranteed in the future. But there's certainly no sync upfronts guaranteed in the future. And I've probably seen only 10 to 20% of my income, if that, come from sync payments from libraries. Secondly, I've asked people who make their full-time living on this and the aforementioned people who make six figures or more a year on this, and they tell me that the sync side is 10 or 20% tops of what they get from sync. Now, again, I may have people out there steaming out of their head at what I'm saying right now, but guess what? This is my channel, so I'll just say what I think. And what I think is that I would take money today over possible money tomorrow all the time. Now, I wouldn't buy out my writer side because that is savings. That's almost like stock money I'm putting away for another day to be paid like I was paid this week, which was very helpful, the money that I got this week in paying bills and things. So that's what I want for the rest of my life, is that back end. But the front end, it's just, you don't really get statements like you do with your PRO. You don't know if you're getting what you're getting, and there's no really records, at least with the ones that I've seen so far. Now, I'm working with some different libraries now, so they might have way better statements when they pay sync. But my hot take is I'd take a buyout of the sync every time, especially if it's on a song-by-song basis or an album-by-album basis. I know a guy who is actually making $1,000 per song as a buyout for sync from a large company. But he also gets the back end, 100% of the writer side. Who wouldn't take that deal? Per song, $1,000, $500 per song. Would you take that? $2.50 per song. Would you take that? I think I would, just because I work fast. If you work slowly, then that may not be very much. But if you're at a place where you work very fast, and if you are a person who's watching this right now or watching this later, and you can tell me in the comments, do you make any money in advances or buyouts? Advances are a little different. They are more advances on future sync royalties that the library might get. So let's say they decide to advance you $2.50 per song against future royalties. But buyouts are different. Buyouts are just like, we bought you out. You have no more rights to the sync part of this, and you only have what you're going to get in the PRO. I don't know how many of you would agree with that, but I'm telling you right now that at my stage of my career, I would take that all day long. I've always taken money up front for my work. Ever since I started a studio in 2000, ever since I started working for people out of my house in the 90s, I would have them give me a deposit. Or when I worked in a studio, they would pay for their day and leave. They wouldn't leave with a master or any recording unless they paid for the day. So I believe in getting paid day of, if possible. So if I can get paid when I deliver something, one payment when I deliver something, and then have another payment that's possible when it gets used, I'm taking that every time.